UK inflation cools to 3.4% in May, matching forecasts. China's central bank unveils 8 measures to open financial sector. And La Liga president Abbas urges Club World Cup cancellation, citing economic disruptions. Welcome to the Economic Bulletin. We start off with the United States, where President Donald Trump has knocked the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell for what he expected would be a decision not to lower interest rates. He added that the man he put in the role during his last term had done a poor job. Trump, speaking to reporters at the White House, mused about appointing himself to lead the U.S. Central Bank. He noted that the country is taking care of the debt ceiling issue. Trump further highlighted that Apple is going to buy a lot of Trump gold cards. He expressed the need for China to bless the TikTok deal and that they are going to have a trade deal with India. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced plans to significantly increase the Department of Defense's budget, pledging $62 billion specifically to strengthen nuclear capabilities. Speaking on Capitol Hill at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing today, Hegseth stated the country is rapidly restoring its military manufacturing capabilities. He affirmed that the U.S. will defend its assets in the region, adding that the Defense Department is working in cooperation with the Department of Homeland Security to achieve its budget goals.
Now, as is custom with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary.
The U.S. Senate has passed a bill to create a regulatory framework for U.S. dollar-pegged cryptocurrency tokens known as stable coins. The bill, dubbed the Genius Act, received bipartisan support, with several Democrats joining most Republicans to back the proposed federal rules. The bill passed with a 68-30 vote. On a more global scale, the United Nations Trade and Development Agency Secretary-General Rebecca Greenspan has expressed concern that the organization's work will be hampered even as demand for its services increase due to the extensive tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Greenspan noted that she and her team proposed cutting 70 out of approximately 500 posts for UNCTAD's 2026 budget. She described this significant reduction as painful, highlighting the substantial number of positions eliminated by one budget cycle. Greenspan further cautioned that these cuts would constrain the organization's capabilities and overall functions.
It really will constrain the organization. No way to disguise this.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced that the recent surge in energy prices has diminished the immediate need to lower the G7's price cap on Russian oil exports. Von der Leyen explained that the current market conditions mean the existing $60 cap is now having a more significant impact.
Very clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We have voiced our
British inflation eased to an annual rate of 3.4% in May, down from 3.5% in April, matching economist expectations. The Office for National Statistics noted that an earlier error in car tax data had overstated April's inflation. While inflation saw a leap in April due to the higher utility prices and taxes, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and its impact on oil prices poses a renewed risk of price pressures, complicating the central bank's path forward. The Bank of England, which had also projected a 3.4% reading for May, is widely expected to leave interest rates unchanged at its policy decision. Still in Europe, Russia has opened its annual International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, drawing participants from over 140 countries and territories, primarily from Asia, the Middle East, and South America. The forum features discussions on expanding economic cooperation through the BRICS framework as Russia shifts focus towards non-Western partnerships. President Vladimir Putin is set to speak Friday, likely addressing sanctions and Russia's global economic strategy. The Federal State Statistics Service has reported that Russia's consumer price inflation registered 0.4% month-on-month and 9.9% year-on-year in May 2025. This reading was higher than anticipated, interrupting a recent trend of inflation curbing away from 10%. Despite the surprise, the Central Bank of Russia proceeded with a 100 basis point cut to its key interest rates on June 6th, bringing it to 20% from a record high of 21% maintained since October 2024. Analysts attribute May's elevated inflation largely to the services sector, even as non-food good prices declined for a second consecutive month, supported by a strong ruble. Moving on to Asia, where China's central bank has announced 8 new measures aimed at further opening up the country's financial sector. Unveiled by the People's Bank of China Governor Pan Gongsheng at the annual Luzhou Forum. The initiatives included establishing an interbank trade repository, setting up an international digital renminbi operations center to promote its global use, and launching a comprehensive reform pilot for offshore trading financial services in Shanghai's Lingang special area. The measures are intended to boost Shanghai's role as a financial hub, improve macroeconomic regulation, and expand financing channels for Chinese firms going global, among other goals. The head of People's Bank of China has pledged to expand the international use of its digital yuan. It's also called for the development of a multipolar global currency system where several currencies dominate the world economy. People's Bank of China Governor Pan Gongsheng stated that the country will establish an international operations center for eCNY in Shanghai. Pan added that digital technologies have exposed weaknesses in the traditional cross-border payment system, which are less efficient and vulnerable to geopolitical risks. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov in Astana, pledging to deepen strategic cooperation and align development strategies ahead of the China Central Asia Summit. Xi emphasized boosting trade, investment, and connectivity, especially the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway, while expanding cooperation in green energy, AI and culture. Japarov reaffirmed support for the One China principle and welcomed further Chinese investment. Both leaders committed to stronger coordination in global platforms like the SCO and the UN. The meeting concluded with the signing of multiple bilateral agreements covering agriculture, customs, science, and media. New Zealand and China have inked a tourism cooperation deal as Prime Minister Christopher Luxon kicked off his first official visit to China. The agreement aims to boost Chinese visitor numbers to New Zealand, as Luxon emphasized the need to reinvigorate the tourism market post-COVID. Luxon, making his first official visit to China since taking office in November 2023, highlighted the strong political ties between the two nations, noting that ongoing dialogue with Chinese leadership is key to expanding trade and addressing global challenges. The visit follows New Zealand's announcement of a 12-month visa waiver trial for Chinese travelers arriving from Australia, following China's visa-free policy for New Zealanders last year. For further analysis, we're joined from Hong Kong by geopolitical analyst and researcher at the University of Manchester, Marvin Lee. Welcome, sir, to Qnews' Economic Bulletin. Sir, firstly, let's start off by asking, how do you see China's new financial opening measures?
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for your question. China's financial opening is not just economic liberalization, it is strategic hedging against U.S. financial dominance amid rising U.S.-China decoupling, especially in technology and capital markets. Beijing is selectively liberalizing there are 3 points here. First, to attract non-Western capital, especially from Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and UAE, and ASEAN countries like Singapore, Malaysia, and the BRICS countries like all the way to Brazil and maybe Russia. And second, to build resilience against U.S. sanctions by reducing reliance on Western financial institutions like the SWIFT or IMF or WTO. And the third, to project a narrative of China as a reliable, rule-based financial partner, especially to the global South countries. So let me give you an example, before ending this question. China's outreach to Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds like the PIF or Saudi Arabia investing in Chinese technology and finance signals alignment beyond Western alliance. So basically, I can see that there will be a very good future between these two countries because they have mutual benefit.
So with this move to the global south, what are the biggest economic benefits for foreign businesses from China's new financial opening measures?
First of all, there are 3 points of economic benefits for not just for China, also for the global south as well. The first one, to attract global south firms like all the global firms from UAE, Saudi Aramco from Saudi Arabia, to replace the US and EU players who face raising scrutiny back home, asking lots of difficult questions, which is very sensitive to some countries. And second, to anchor multinational interests in China, commercial interdependence or deterrence against geopolitical tensions. And the third one, to offer a parallel ecosystem to Western finance, particularly for nations wary of dollar-based politics.
Okay, now, China has spoken about the idea of a digital yuan and that there should be several currencies dominating the world economy in general. What kind of economic hurdles does the digital yuan face to become a major international payment option?
This is a very interesting question because there's still a long way to complete this so-called digital yen operation in the long future. So we call it eCNY or digital yen is China's attempt to build a currency immune to U.S. control, particularly after watching the West has frozen the Russia's reserve all the assets overseas. If successful, it could allow sanctioned states like Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, to trade outside of the SWIFT system and to reduce U.S. leverage over cross-border transactions. And let me give you one example here. So like but there's a challenge here, digital sovereignty fears, because some countries are cautious about the technology backed by Beijing, but I think this can be easily solved among countries.
So, sir, now how likely is a multipolar global currency system going to happen? And what sort of economic steps is China taking to sort of achieve this? Like you said, it's going to ease certain problems when it comes to payment methods from countries like, for instance, Iran. But what challenges would they be facing?
As for the challenges, not just from Iran, let's say, for example, India and Japan, they have a very conservative relationship with China right now. They have not engaged with China's CNY pilots, highlighting a geopolitical distrust against China. And second, the SWIFT RMB share remained at almost 3% as of 2024. It is very a small percentage. Talking about in comparison, more than 50% of the USD reserve in the global banking system, showing slow global uptake despite huge testing at home. And the third, back in 2022, Nigeria even reject Huawei-backed e-payment infrastructure linked to China digital currency initiative because there has been a rising tension between Sino and American tensions here.
So how will these measures specifically boost Shanghai's economic role as a global financial hub if they achieve the idea of digital currency and making it mainstream?
Okay, let me give you some examples first, so I can let every audience understand it. Back in 2023, Tesla and Saudi Aramco both issued green bonds from Shanghai Free Trade Zone, and this is the first example. And second, Shanghai International Energy Exchange (INE), we call it INE, launched the yen-denominated petroleum future markets, offering an alternative to the Brent or WTI oil benchmark. So you can see that China has been doing lots of measures just to alleviate the sphere of influence from the American, and also and Hong Kong has also played a major role, not just Shanghai, because Hong Kong is is the largest offshore CNY market to shift capital and financial flows to Shanghai to de-risk exposure to Western pressures. And Hong Kong has been doing a great job in terms of the legal system and the currency system as well. So not just Shanghai and Hong Kong, they are just like brother and sister working different dimensions, but to working at the same goal for the Chinese government in the long term.
Okay, from Hong Kong, that was geopolitical analyst and researcher at the University of Manchester, Marvin Lee. Thank you for your insights and thank you for joining us. Still in Asia, Japanese government data has shown that exports fell in May for the first time in 8 months as big automakers were hit by sweeping U.S. tariffs. Japan's total exports in May dropped 1.7% year-on-year by value to 8.1 trillion yen. Exports to the U.S. slumped 11.1% last month from a year earlier, while exports to China were down 8.8%. Automobile sector dragged down by a 24.7% plunge in automobiles and a 19% fall in auto components. Data also showed that imports dropped 7.7% in May from a year earlier. As a result, Japan ran a trade deficit of 637.6 billion yen last month. South Korea's central bank has stated that U.S. tariffs were likely to exert downward price pressures domestically as more Chinese goods might be sent to neighboring countries rather than the U.S. because of Washington's levies. In its biannual inflation report, the bank noted that headline inflation will remain just shy of 2% target in the medium term as tepid domestic demand will continue to offset price pressures from rising food and services costs. The Bank of Korea added that levies imposed by Washington may decrease demand in countries including South Korea and Japan, as the two are unlikely to respond through retaliatory tariff policies. Moving to Africa, where Statistics South Africa has reported that South African retail sales saw a significant increase, rising 5.1% year-on-year in April. This marks a notable acceleration from the revised 1.2% growth recorded in March. On a month-on-month basis, seasonally adjusted retail sales also showed positive momentum, increasing by 0.9% in April. On another note, the Liga president Javier Tebas is calling for a Club World Cup to be cancelled after its 2025 edition, citing its economic impracticality and financial disruptions to major domestic leagues. Tebas argues that the 32-team tournament offers insufficient financial returns and is critical of its free broadcast, which he says devalues content. He specifically warns that prize money for top clubs could force the Liga season delays, impacting the league's own financial calendar. The American Petroleum Institute has reported that U.S. crude oil inventories declined significantly during the week ending June 13th. The U.S. oil stockpiles fell by 10.13 million barrels, while the API reported 337,000 barrel inventory decrease in the prior week. According to oil price calculations of API data so far this year, crude oil inventories were up 7.6 million barrels. On the other hand, distillate inventories increased by 318,000 barrels. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak has stated that despite the escalation of the Middle East conflict, there is currently no shortage of oil and gas on the market. With supply and demand remaining balanced, Novak acknowledged that certain risks stemming from the conflict are already reflected in current prices. He emphasized that supply continues to expand and has not ceased. Novak declined to speculate on whether oil prices might reach triple figures, calling it a thankless task. He added that Russia sees no risk to its oil exports.
Are you confident there will be cuts today? Confident there will be cuts today? Confident is the consensus?
Oil prices fell nearly 2% on Wednesday after gaining earlier in the session as investors weighed the chance of supply disruptions from the Iran-Israel conflict and potential direct U.S. involvement. Brent crude futures fell 1.8% to $76.73 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude dropped 1.7% at $73.55. Both contracts had gained over 4% the previous session. Citi has lowered its short-term and long-term gold price targets, now projecting prices could fall below $3,000 per ounce by late 2025 or early 2026. In a note, the bank cited declining investment demand and improving global growth outlook as key reasons. Citi expects current gold prices, supported by geopolitical risks and U.S. tariff concerns, to consolidate before a downward trend begins. Conversely, Citi forecasts silver prices to rise $40 per ounce over the next 6 to 12 months due to strong demand. Oil prices were little changed on Wednesday as investors waited for the Federal Reserve's policy decision and comments from Chair Jerome Powell, while platinum surged to a more than 4-year peak. Spot gold was down 0.1% at $3,386.10 an ounce. U.S. gold futures fell 0.1% to $3,403.50. Platinum rose 3.1% to $1,302.17, highest since February 2021. In markets, global shares saw a mixed performance today, with U.S. markets posting gains, while European and Asian markets showed varied results. In the U.S., both the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones rose 0.4%, and the Nasdaq futures hiked 0.53%. European markets were more mixed. The UK FTSE 100 increased 0.13%, while France's CAC 40 dipped 0.28%, and Germany's DAX lessened 0.34%. Asian markets also saw varied results. Japan's Nikkei 225 climbed 0.9%. The Shanghai Composite edged up 0.04%, but Hong Kong's Hang Seng decreased 1.12%. That brings us to the end of our economic bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. UK inflation cools to 3.4% in May, matching forecasts. China's central bank unveils 8 measures to open financial sector. And La Liga president Tebas urges Club World Cup cancellation, citing economic disruptions. This brings us to the end of the Economic Bulletin. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Qnews.